Will be recorded. Thank you, Heather. So thank you for sharing your lunch hour with the African American Black Employee Resource Group, affectionately known as AABERG. And welcome to session 2 of our 4-part series from Black Voices Matter. Today we have an amazing guest, and we cannot wait to introduce him to you. Please note that we will have a special session from about 1 to 1:30, where you'll have an opportunity to have a Q&A with our speaker. However, don't forget to post your questions to the chat, and our committee will keep their eyes out for it. And also don't forget to complete the evaluation at the end, and we'll make sure that we share the link in this chat. So you'll see that pop up a few times. I'm Danielle Hairston Green. I am the chairperson for AABERG. I'm also the Institute Director for Human Development and Relationships with UW-Madison Division of Extension. AABERG purpose is to serve as a resource for and foster current and future African American colleagues' success by sponsoring programming, providing collegial support, encouraging belonging, and raising a collective voice related to issues that impact employees' ability to thrive personally and professionally. None of this could be possible without the support of our leadership team. Rhonda Davis is our co-chair. Quintella Perry is our secretary. Catherine Borick-Smock is our treasurer. The co-chairs of Membership and Retention Committee is James Bowling and Eva Terry. The chair for the Marketing and Media Committee is Carla Williams, and the chair for Professional Development is Cheryl Isabel. I want to pause for a reflection of this month in Black history. On February the 4th in 1960, 4 freshmen from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College, affectionately known as NCATS in Greensboro, walked into the F.W. Woolworth store and quietly sat down at the lunch counter. A little known fact, the store owner contacted the police to arrest the protesters, and when the police refused, he even walked several miles to the police precinct to demand that arrests be made. They were refused service, but they stayed until closing time without being arrested. The next morning, they came with 25 more students. On the third day, 63 students joined the sit-in. On the following day, the students were joined by 3 white female students from the Women's College of University of North Carolina. And by the 5th day, Woolworth had more than 300 demonstrators at the store. The next day, the company said they were willing to negotiate, but only token changes were made. The students resumed their sit-ins. The city adopted more stringent segregation policies, and 45 students were arrested and charged with trespassing. The students were so enraged by this that they launched a massive boycott of stores with segregated lunch counters. Sales dropped by a third, forcing the store owners to relent. 6 months from the very sit-in, the 4 freshmen returned and were served at Woolworth's lunch counter. Within a year, similar peaceful demonstrations took place in over 100 cities, North and South. At Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, students formed their own organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. The students' bravery in the face of verbal and physical abuse led to integration in many stores even before the passage of Civil Rights Act of 1964. The former Woolworths Greensboro now houses the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, which features a restored version of the lunch counter where the Greensboro 4 sat. Part of the original counter is on display at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. Visit AABERG's SharePoint site to find out more information about Every Day in Black History. So, without further ado, I would like to share the bio of our speaker for today. Shon F. Barnes was appointed as the Madison Police Department's Chief of Police by the Police and Fire Commission in December of 2020. He was previously the Director of Training and Professional Development for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago, Illinois. Chief Barnes was the Deputy Chief of Police in Salisbury, North Carolina from 2017 to 2020, and a captain with the Greensboro Police Department in North Carolina, where he began his career as a patrol officer in the fall of 2000. Chief Barnes is a nationally recognized leader in crime reduction and community police relations. He was honored as a National Institute of Justice Law Enforcement Advancing Through Data and Science Scholar for using innovative technology to reduce crime, and is a council member on the National Police Institute's Council on Police Reforms and Race. The council is a nonpartisan initiative which uses research and evidence to consider and offer recommendations to resolve some of the most pressing issues regarding police reform. Throughout his career, Chief Barnes has implemented neighborhood-oriented policing, which focuses on smaller police beat response, police neighborhood ownership, and community engagement at all levels within the organization. This month, we can add a little new information to Black history, as Chief Barnes has also been inducted into a Hall of Fame. And this particular Hall of Fame is called the Evidence-Based Policing Hall of Fame. So add that to your Black history. Chief Barnes attended Elizabeth City State University in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, where he received a bachelor's degree in history, pre-law, and the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he received a master's degree in criminal justice. He has earned a PhD in leadership studies from North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University. Chief Barnes' philosophy as it relates to policing simply states, policing should be neighborhood-oriented, community-focused, business and residential, problem-oriented, and based on the most current empirical research available to quickly reduce crime and improve citizen satisfaction with police services. To view Dr. Barnes' full bio, please visit the AABERG SharePoint site. Now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Shon Barnes.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison Green. I really, really appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact of your Black history fact. I am a proud alumni of North Carolina A&T. What happened on February 1, 1960, I think certainly shaped the world. I really believe that. And so I'm proud that that's a part of my legacy. My swear date, the date that I was sworn in was February 1. And I picked that intentionally because I wanted to share a little bit of that history with Madison. And so on the anniversary of my date of being sworn in, I always do a state of public safety, and I always give a Black history fact. So I appreciate you sharing that. Let me say that I'm certainly excited about the opportunity to be here and share some thoughts with you. I certainly I won't talk long, but I hope to be interesting. I hope to motivate you a little bit as we come together in this space. Let me start by saying that something that I know is that my mom believes in me. I know that for a fact. My mom believes in me. Recently, we had the Super Bowl, and some of you may have watched that. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the San Francisco 49ers. I really didn't have skin in the game, as my team, the Carolina Panthers, are the worst team in football, and will probably be that for a good little while. But when I was a young kid living in community housing, or what is often known as the projects, there was a family that lived behind me named the Cofields. And they had a son named Timothy who was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs when I was a kid. So this was the first time I ever saw anyone that I actually knew on television. And he was like a hometown hero for me. So I did root for the Kansas City Chiefs, specifically for that fact. And he was recruited out of Elizabeth City State, where I got my undergraduate degree. It's also where Alex Haley went to school, the author of Roots. But Timothy had two brothers, Ernell and Adrian. and they were certainly on their way to having the athletic build of their bigger brother. So they became our neighborhood bullies, and I was one of their targets. And so I, of course, sought advice from my mother. Now, what did I tell you about my mother? She believes in me. My mother told me something very important. She said, if you will stand up to a bully, that bully will back down. So the very next day, I go to the bus stop where everyone is standing because there's only one bus stop in community housing. And I have on my school clothes. Y'all know what school clothes are. At least I hope you do. And he grabs my book bag, Adrian does, and he proceeds to pull me down. And I turn, I face him, and I push him directly in his chest. And I stood up to him. And then he beat me down. It was terrible. And I got up, I dusted myself off. I picked up my books and I said, man, this woman really actually believes in me. She thinks I can do anything. And so let me say that if you're going to go down this road of being successful, if you're going to go down this road of having leadership, especially as being an African American in leadership, you have to have someone that believes in you. So before I get started, let me say, if you don't think you have someone that believes in you, let me say that I do. Let me say that people like Rhonda and Dr. Harrison Green and everyone who took the time to put together this series, they believe in you. And so you can think about that as you go down your journey. And if you ever need someone to talk to, if you ever need someone to motivate you, I am only a call away because I think that's very important. So what I wanted to do today really is just come to you, not really as the chief of police, although I may share some experiences in my profession, but just to come to you as a humble public servant, a citizen, I think of this planet, as someone who is a Black man in a position of leadership, and share with you some things that I think may help you get through your day, get through your journey. I want to share some of my worldview as I navigated the unpredictable waters of leadership, becoming a police chief in a majority city. It's certainly not easy, and certainly not easy to maintain that as well. Simply put, I'm going to offer you just three things that I want you to think about as you develop your leadership style, as you try to navigate. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is leadership, right? And so, you know, as my bio states, I'm really big on research and empirical basis. So I'll give you a little bit of that. So Ronald Heifetz defines leadership as an influence process. Certainly is. But to me, that's a very simplistic view of what we all do every day. Ken Blanchard defines leadership as simply achieving worthwhile goals while taking into account the needs and wants and concerns of everyone. And I think that really exemplifies what we do each and every day. There's no person in leadership, especially if you're African American in leadership, you have to take into account how everyone feels all the time. And that is certainly true with my profession and many others. And that's what we do each and every day. I want you to understand that in order to do this, you have to develop two things. One, you have to be a hopeful leader, and you have to be a resilient leader. It doesn't mean that you deny the present reality, because oftentimes when we're placed in positions of leadership, we're there to tell everyone that everything's going to be okay and not to actually deal with the problem. And so it's important that you know that if you're in a position of leadership, you're not to stand in the middle of a forest fire and say that everything's okay, because you certainly have the skills to deal with it. I call it being a hopeful firefighter, right? When you get out with your tools to solve that problem, you do so with a smile on your face, knowing that you're capable to do so. Too many times we are expected to simply smile through everything while ignoring the fires around us. I'm suggesting that if you want to lead at a higher level, you have to learn how to be a hopeful firefighter because you've earned your position. The second thing I want to talk about in that regard is this idea of resiliency. I got to tell you, it's something that I have studied working on my PhD in leadership studies, and it has been really the focus of my policing journey here in Madison. One of the things that I have been doing is having retreats. And all last year, we talked about this idea of resiliency. It's something that we all know. So I want to share with you some research on resiliency. This comes from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, peer-reviewed study that came out in 2021, otherwise known as NAMI. We've heard of them before. So I want to share something about that. The first thing they say in their research findings is that in order to be resilient, you have to accept where you are. You don't deny the present reality. You have to be able to have the courage to tell people that we can do better, that we can be better. And you have to have the courage to want to challenge people to do more. Sometimes people will say that's extra work. I don't know what that means, but all duties therein, I'm sure that's written somewhere on everyone's job description. You have to lean into that if you're going to truly step into your leadership potential. The second thing they found is that resilient leaders are flexible. And that means you have to understand change. You have to understand what your role is. I have a saying that I tell everyone in my police department. 620 people have heard me say this. Your job is to rearrange the department on a day-to-day basis based on the wants and needs of the community that we serve. And too many times in my profession, you've seen police officers be pigeonholed, if you will, on policy and procedure, as if we can't make those decisions. You have to empower people to bring their brains to work. You have to empower people to be able to make decisions in light of policy. If you've ever gone to the DMV and other places that are historically known for not bending as much, you know what it's like when you get a different type of service. And that's what we have to create within our organizations. The second thing is, third thing, excuse me, is that resilient people have to be willing to learn new things. There is a study that says that if you spend 1,000 hours every year working on one thing, you will become an expert at that, about 2.5 hours per day. What do you start your day with? What do you listen to? What are you reading? Obviously, if you're attending this type of seminar or webinar, you're doing that and you're investing in yourself. My recommendation for you to navigate this space is to invest in yourself. Find something to read or listen to. For me, I'm a big fan of YouTube, and I think success leaves clues. And so I listen to people who are in my space, who are police chiefs, who are successful, who are great communicators, who do great press conferences, and I listen and learn every morning when I'm getting ready. I have a Bluetooth speaker. I'll put the speaker up. I'll listen to something, and I like to begin my day working on myself. And I would suggest that you do the same thing. The fourth thing is that resilient people seek solutions, and the key word there is seek. You have to build what I call a village. You have to build a network that will help you find solutions to problems that you have. Networks like the one that you're in today. I certainly do not have all the answers, but I guarantee you in my phone, there's someone that I can call who will pick up the phone that I can share my problem or my issue with and can help me with that. You have to seek solutions. Now, the other side of that is that we have people who are better at determining problems than they are at solutions. You have to be careful about that too. I call them expert articulators of problems and not problem solvers. Because you are here, because you're in your position, you have to be a problem solver. And I work in a field where nothing is copyrighted. So there should be no reason why I can't find a solution to a problem. I simply have to know where to look. And often I begin in my network, and because I am connected to trying to learn something every day, because I am convinced that I want to be a lifelong learner for the rest of my life, I know where to look for that information. I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about my PhD journey is that the journey taught me how to find information. And if I can't find it, it taught me how to discover information using the scientific method. The fifth thing is that police people, I'm thinking about police, have to be resourceful. And in order to do that, you have to create your network. Certainly, it does take a bit of creativity in order to be a good leader, and you should encompass that. In my profession, we're not very good at change, and we've seen that throughout the course of some of the things that we've seen in policing. People who are unwilling to change at all. I love change. I embrace change. I also encourage you, if you get an opportunity, to do a personality assessment and see where you rank as far as your ability to adapt to change and what are the things that are keeping you from doing that. That's one of the things that I'm working on with my leadership this year, is doing those personality assessments. That's because during one of the conversations about resiliency, someone once stated that there are only two things that police officers don't like, and that's change and the way things are. And when I heard that, it made me think about, well, I have a responsibility to navigate change within my organization, and there's a process for doing that. The sixth thing is that resilient people have to be creative. You have to think outside the box. Albert Einstein has a quote that I like. He said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. And I'll say that again. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. One of the things about my profession that I've learned is that often some of the best strategies have come from outside of policing. And so when people talk to me about bringing civilian thought, if you will, into policing, I really don't have an issue with that, because I encourage everyone to think outside of your own curriculum. And because you are in extension or connected to extension, I'm certain that that is happening. We have to draw from social sciences. We have to draw from the medical field. We have to draw from computer technology, information technology, if we're going to lead at a higher level. And then seven is resilient people have to have realistic expectations. So I want to read to you exactly what the findings were. They said having unrealistic expectations set people up for disappointment. I want to say that I totally disagree with that. I don't believe in disappointment. I only believe in learning. I think that you should try and try again, and you should fail and fail as much as you can. The only difference between a winner and someone who's failed is that a winner tried one more time. I really disagreed with this when I read this, because I've always been taught to dream big. I've always been taught that there are things that I can do in order to make myself, make my family, to make this community better. We're only limited by our imagination. And so my advice to everyone listening today is to always dream big. If it doesn't work out, then you try again. This attainment of being a chief of police, I failed 3 times. I failed at a small agency. I failed at a mid-sized agency. I failed at a large agency. But it didn't stop me, because I know who I am, and I know the skills and knowledge and abilities that I have. So that would be my advice to you, is ignore number 7. Have unrealistic expectations for yourself as well as for the people who you work for. Now, the third thing is near and dear to my heart, because I learned about this late in life. I wish I had learned about this earlier, and it's called mindset or mindfulness. You probably know more about it than I do. But what we learn is that the brain and the computer are kind of like the same thing. They do not know the difference between what you tell it and what is real. And so if you tell the computer that 5 plus 5 is 2, that's what it's going to compute. When we all got up in the morning, we all got dressed, we, put on our clothes, we all looked in the mirror before we left, and we told ourselves that we were amazing people. And your brain didn't say, who are you kidding? You're not that great. No, it didn't do that at all, because our brains will do exactly what we tell it. And when that happens, our body language changes. And I believe that we can affect the mindset of others through how we see ourselves. Do not expect anyone in your conference room, anyone in your boardroom to think more of yourself than you do. And so when you walk in that boardroom, when you walk in your conference room, and you sit at the head of the table, at the end of the table, it doesn't really matter. And you know that you're competent, you know that you're intelligent, you know that you're well prepared. Everyone else will know it too, because your body language will demonstrate this. So I like hip hop. I grew up on hip hop, so you have to forgive the analogy. But Jay-Z once had a verse in one of his songs that stated early on, he said, I walk like a ball player. I walk like a ball player. Jay-Z was talking about his confidence looks like a professional athlete, even though he was certainly not one at the particular time. You have to have the same confidence and air about yourself when you walk in the room, because what that does is it changes the mindset of everyone else. And I think that's so very, very important. Demand and expect all the rights and privileges associated with your roles. Uh, and this is for my female who may be on this call, because I've seen this before throughout the course of my career. Do not downgrade your intelligence in deference to a man's ego. And I would say this for anyone on the call. And I've seen that before. And it's hard because people have these particular egos and we don't want to explain that we have the answer because of how people may see us. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're there for a reason. I'm here to tell you that your gender, your race, who you love, your religion, it doesn't matter. And if people in your boardroom are doing that, then you deserve to have a conversation with them about it. And to be honest with you, it's really not your problem. If their ego gets in the way of you being successful, you don't downplay yourself. You don't allow them to give you the answer. You don't have to spoon feed them because you're worthy. And I want you to know that. Mindset and body language are connected. I feel like that the answer to ending police brutality, and I have to speak on this, is to change the mindset of officers from a negative thought to a positive thought. When we as police officers see everyone as our mother, our brother, our sister, you will no longer have brutality in any way, shape, or form. It's not about training officers how to arrest people better. It's about training officers how to value people. And I truly believe that. You have to carry yourself a certain way, and then people will respond to that. But for police officers, we certainly have to treat everyone as, this is an old saying in policing, you treat everyone as if they're your grandmother. And if you do that, you can't go wrong. Now, speaking of grandmothers, my grandmother instilled in me a mindset years ago, writing this kind of brought it back to mind. I want to share this with you briefly. So I don't say this to elicit any certain type of feedback or to say that I'm better than anyone else. But I'm 49 years old and I have never done drugs, right? I've never done marijuana, and you don't have to raise your hand and say, well, I have. You don't have to do that, please. But I've never done drugs. As a young kid, we spent a lot of time at our grandmother's house, right? So I'm from the South. It's always highly matriarchal. And my grandmother used to tell me how special I am. And she promised me, or had me promise her, that I would always be a good student and that I would never do drugs. It was just her thing. And I said, okay, you got it. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have my opportunity to. And so as a young man, growing up, being around all my cousins, and there was probably 20 of us, one of my cousins had gotten a hold of what's commonly referred to as a joint. I know you don't know what that is. I'll explain it to you later. But he offered to give it to me and said, let's smoke this, right? So we're out back somewhere we shouldn't be. And he's like, let's smoke it. And I was like, no, I can't do it. And he asked me why. And I told him because I was special. And he said, well, who told you that? And I said, well, grandma told me I was special. And his response to me was, you do realize she tells everybody that. But for me, I had actually believed it. It became a part of who I am and who and who uh, I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone special. I wanted to be someone that made her proud. She changed my mindset tremendously. She is just was one of those persons that truly loved me and believed that I was the greatest thing ever. But she told everyone that. She passed away about 3 years ago, I think, and it was very sad for me because I felt that no one on this planet would ever love me unconditionally again, right? But I honor her by trying to help people and trying to do the right thing. So that's where my mindset comes from. The last thing I want to talk about is you have to have a strategy for yourself. You have to sit down and think about where you want to take your leadership. What do you want to do with your life? And most importantly, how are you going to have an impact on the world? You have to plan for the long term. And if that gets too tough, plan for the week. If that gets too tough, plan for the day. I try to begin my day every day with some type of strategy. I sit down and write out the things that I want to accomplish, knowing very well I may not get them all done. But if I don't do that, I may not get anything done because my time is often being pulled in several different directions. So it helps me with that. In 2014, I took a course called Strategic Planning as a part of my PhD journey. And in that course, the professor asked if we would write a strategic plan for a university. And so I began to do that, and it was a lot of work. And I thought to myself, why don't I have a strategic plan for myself? And my strategic plan, and I can find that for you at some point. I'll have my thumb drive with me, but it's time stamped and dated. I stated in 2014 that I would be a chief of police by the year 2020. And I was appointed in December 2019 in the middle of a pandemic. And I had almost forgot about that until I was digging through some files looking for something, and I found it. So I'm telling you that the value and benefit of writing things down for strategy is so very, very important. Now, when you're working on your strategy, this is what I'm going to suggest is that we have to work together more. I've been in the Midwest for about 3 years now, maybe four, going on 4 years, 4 years. And to be honest with you, the amount of collaboration that I see among a very small population of Black leaders gives me a little bit of heartburn. I think that we should definitely be working together more and we should be serving each other more. I know it's very difficult because it was difficult in my journey. In my journey, being in policing now for 25 years of my life, I have never had anyone who wasn't Black harm me. I have in 3 different agencies had a person who intentionally tried to harm my career, and in each of the agencies, that person was Black. And I often wonder, why are people self-serving? And then I got to thinking about it. I wrote this down, and I hope it lands with you. Self-serving people are easy to identify because they think that who they are is a function of how much money they make, the recognition they get for their efforts, and the power and status within their position. And that's okay if you think that's going to get you where you want to go, but I'm here to tell you that will not last. What lasts is the impact that you have on others, because our life truly is about the positive impact that we leave on other people. Because here's what I've seen in the course of my life. If you were to die today, they'd clean your office out by the end of the week, and you would be replaced by the end of the month. What stays the same, what never changes, is the impact that you have on other people. The people that you leave behind that say, I am better because this person came through, because I work for so and so, I feel like I'm a better person. And I think that has been the purpose for why God put me on this little small planet, to have an impact on others. I want to leave you with a short story of impact that always gets me. And I'm going to try to get through this. The older I get, the more I become a crier. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But I'm going to get through this. I promise you. When I was working as a patrol officer in Greensboro, we had a house that was in the neighborhood that was once owned by a very nice young lady, older lady who passed away. She left the house to her daughter. Her daughter didn't want it. She lived somewhere else. She gave it to her granddaughter. Her granddaughter turned the house into what we would call a crack house, whatever you want to call it. It was my responsibility to do something about it. We investigated it for a while. We found out that it was worse than what we thought. There were so much criminal activity going on there, that we did an investigation. I did an investigation and essentially did a search warrant. I did a search warrant on this particular home. We were able to make multiple arrests, get weapons, and the person who was maintaining the home, her name was Angela. And when I found her, she was highly addicted to crack cocaine, and she was really in a bad place, a very, very bad place. So I did my job, processed it. Um, she was arrested and she was sentenced to 3 years in jail, in prison. Fast forward, I'm no longer on patrol. I'm working as a school resource officer. And one day I see these two young boys who are coming down the breezeway. And this is one of those days where it's unseasonably cold in North Carolina. And I stopped them and I was like, hey man, where are your coats? Because it was very, very cold. I mean, it was frigid out. And they said, well, Officer Barnes, we're waiting for Give a Kid a Coat. Give a Kid a Coat is a charity we have down south that's associated with one of the dry cleaners where you can drop a coat off. But it was about 2 weeks away. So anyone who knows me knows that I always have a gym bag or something with me. I just do. So I have them go with me, and I go to my car, and I have some sweatshirts and I have some tracksuits, and I give that to them. I check on them later today. I make a phone call, and we're able to get the kids' coats. I did not think anything of it. 3 weeks go by, and I receive a letter to the school addressed to me from prison. And I still have the envelope. I don't know what I did with the letter, but I still have the envelope. And I look at it, and it's from Angela. And I open it up, and it turns out that those two boys were her sons. And she shared with me in the letter how she prayed that someone would be there to support her kids while she was gone. And because they were in foster care, things didn't move as fast as probably they may should. And when she told me that they were raving about this officer who, I was kind of popular with the kids at the time, that it was me, she knew that her prayers had been answered. Now, certainly I don't suggest that I'm, sent, to answer anyone's prayers. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is I know my purpose for being here. And I know that leadership matters. And I know that if we work together, that's nothing we can't do. So I'm simply suggesting that what you do each and every day should make a difference in the lives of someone. And sometimes you don't see it immediately. Sometimes it takes a little time. But I promise you that if you do it the right way, you're going to make a difference. You are making a difference, and you're going to change the lives of everyone else. I want to leave with you simply this: maintain a hopeful and resilient disposition. Remember that you always have to walk like a ball player, whether you are or not, and that you are amazing, you're special, you're talented, and you're in your position for a reason. Work together, because there's an African proverb that simply states, if there's no enemy within, the enemy at the gates can do us no harm. Hope you've enjoyed what I've tried to share with you. I look forward to some conversation and to some questions. And thank you, Dr. Harrison Green.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. Yeah, I'm a little sensitive too, so I had to get it together a little bit before unmuting. Thank you for sharing those insights and some coaching points for many of us that's on this call. I do have a question in the chat for you. What do you do to help overcome the organizational challenges you have that are a result of others not practicing the ideals you represent and want for your organization?
That is an excellent question. Um, So it starts with this. You have to set your own priorities. And sometimes it requires a very tough conversations with people. And I have done that from day one. When I was a school teacher, teaching public school, I had someone tell me after a very tough day, erase the chalkboard and start again the next day. I'm like, but I got all this stuff on there. Nope. You had a bad day, erase everything off and start from the beginning. The language looks different, the handwriting looks different, the placement looks different. And you can do that in your organization. I will tell you today that I'm dealing with things in this organization that are a result of predecessors who didn't think community engagement was important, who established an us versus them mentality, and who knew absolutely nothing about evidence-based policing. And so as a leader, you have to establish your standard. I meet with every section at the beginning of every year. So in January and February, I meet with every employee in their own sections, and I do an hour lecture of my expectations for them. I talk about the history of the department. I talk about where we're going. I talk about our strategy. I talk about what I call our customer service model, how we're to treat people, and our business model, what we're going to do to reduce crime. And you have to do that. The other thing that I will say, and this is, where people don't want to do the tough stuff, is that sometimes when people leave organizations, it benefits the organizations. Every resignation is not created equal. There's some people who resign because they got married, they're going to move to Iowa, and we wish them well. But there are some people who resign because they don't want to change, and we need to wish them well and get them out of your organization. And the truth of the matter is, because I have so many rules and laws and a union contract, some people um, that needs to go, I can't leave them, right? And so you got to know what the rules are. And when people are not abiding by those rules, you have to hold them accountable. Doesn't mean that you fire them, but you have to hold them accountable for your particular standards. So I hope that that answers your question. If you have follow up, we can have a conversation about it.
Thank you for that response. Anyone else have any questions? And remember, we will be, Dr. Barnes will stay on after the session is over to answer some direct questions. And maybe you have some personal questions you would like to share with them in a smaller setting. We will open it up for you to do that. Any additional questions now?
I actually have one, Danny.
Yes, go right ahead.
It's Jonathan again.
Hey.
I always have questions, so. Uh,
Go right ahead.
yeah, sure. So this one's more, I guess, focused on your field, I guess. So in my experience, I guess I'll just tell this story really quick, and then maybe you'll get the question I'm trying to ask. So, right after I graduated college, I had an acquaintance. I wouldn't say it was a friend, but an acquaintance who was really interested in becoming a police officer. And we were talking about it, within a group, and it became clear that the reasons I thought someone would be interested in becoming a police officer were different than the reasons that this person wanted to become a police officer. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is service, supporting people, helping the community, and obviously how you do that through policing maybe looks different than how you do that in other ways. But his focus was, well, I want to kick down doors. I don't know. It just seemed like an action movie is what he was describing. And so from that, I just thought, well, I don't know how you would enter policing with that mindset and then not have it play out in that way, because he didn't mention any other things, right? So it was like, well, if you're approaching it with that mindset, how do you provide service to people? How do you provide mentorship and community connections when none of that is why you're pursuing this position? So my question is, that was a long time ago, but I'm wondering, like, are there things that I'm sure I just don't know that are in place to maybe widen a recruit's or someone who's been on the job for a long time, their view of what the purpose of policing is? And is there a way to catch that as the person's applying to become a police officer? Because I left that a little disturbed, while also recognizing that we do need people who are willing to go into places that other people aren't willing to go into, and that kind of stuff. So that's my story. I hope you can speak towards that a little bit, from your perspective.
Sure. First of all, I don't know if your friend achieved his goal of becoming a police, but if he did, he's going to be bored to death, because those things don't happen very, very often, to be honest. Research says that 70% of policing is done in front of a computer. It's paperwork oriented. And then you have obviously, resolving conflict, and most police officers don't go to jail on a monthly basis, let alone a weekly basis. But we do try to tease that out, in the spirit of transparency. There was a time when that's what we looked for in policing. And we were totally wrong. And we are trying to learn from now the error of our ways. But we screen for that here at the department. One of the questions that I added to the process is, tell me about your volunteer and service experience. And if the answer is you don't have any, then you have to wait till the next cycle and go get some. Because if this is the first time you've ever served anyone or had the opportunity to do something greater than yourself, this is probably not the time. This is probably not your time. You need to understand whether or not you want to do that first before you come in. And we try to do that. We do ride-alongs. They have to do ride-alongs with the officers so they can see exactly the type of work we're going to do. And to make sure that people know it's not like you see on television. It's nothing like that. My profession has more television shows than I think any other profession other than maybe hospitals. And hospitals really don't seem that entertaining to me. But nevertheless, it's not like that in real life. It is about service. It is about solving problems. It is about communication. And there's a lot of paperwork. And that paperwork takes most of your time. So we try to screen for those things. We also have a field training process where during the field training process, by state law, if you're not policing the way we want on your own, in that first 90 days, we can remove you. And we have done that. In fact, we're doing that today as we speak for someone who, quite frankly, doesn't understand the way we want to police. And it's like, thank you for your time, but this is not the job for you. And so we have to do that. We do have a responsibility to ensure that we are training people the right way and that we're also selecting the right people.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that detailed response.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. There's another question. Christine Pirik, she asked, how has your leadership style evolved as you've moved from informal to formal leadership positions?
Yeah, I think my leadership style has changed a lot. Informally, it was just about my technical expertise. And as an informal leader, people went to me when they had questions about a law or a particular case or how to do something. I think as an informal leader, I was way more technical at the aspect of policing. But as you move to a more formal leadership, it becomes more about the concepts and the human skills that you have to have. Conceptually, you have to be able to explain to people why you're doing things. As an informal leader, you don't have to do that as much. But when you become a formal leader, you have more people that you're responsible for, and they want to know the why because that helps them to move forward. It helps with organizational change. And then the human skills. You realize that you don't have the time you used to have to spend with people. You don't have the time in the day you want to have these personal relationships, but they kind of seem more surface. And so you have to be more intentional, I think, about that. I think as a formal leader, I try to be accessible. I'm still a little bit old school. I am a former Marine, if you will. So I do believe in protocol. I do have an open door policy, but if you come in with your problem, I'm going to want to know, did you give anyone an opportunity to help you with that first? Where some people just want to come in and say, hey, Chief, this is what's going on. So I do believe in protocol because I think it's a part of respect as well. But leadership is something that's a process and it's a learning experience. I'm certainly a better leader today than I was February 1, 2021. And I'm trying to get better at it. From a chief standpoint, there's this triangle that I have in my brain where you have the community, you have your employees, and then you have your elected officials. And I need to make at least two of them happy at all times. If all three of them are upset with me, then I may be looking for another job. But I try to keep at least two of them happy. I think the community really appreciates what we're doing. The elected officials is 20 of them, and I only need 11 of them to be happy, and I have about 15 of them, and that's pretty good, to be honest with you. And then the officers, and depending on the day of the week, they really like what we have going on. So that ebbs and flows a little bit.
Awesome. And I have another question from Mary Nelson. She asked, does Madison have a citizen police oversight committee? And what are the pros and cons of such oversight?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there is a civilian oversight board here in Madison with an independent monitor. I happen to be the only chief of police in the country that has worked for civilian oversight and have been a chief of police. So my perspective is a little different from anyone else you're going to talk to because I know that civilian oversight boards can be a good thing if they are managed well. And what that means is there must be transparency and there must be timeliness in what they do. If you can't do that, you're going to fail. If you can't show that you care just as much about a complaint as you do a compliment, you're going to fail. And I learned that from my time working for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago. My job was a director of training and accountability. And so it was my job to train all the investigators, train all the lawyers, set up training, schedule trainings for them so that they could do their job in a way that's fair, number one, in a way that's timely, cutting down on some of these processes and making sure that people see equity and equality in what they're doing. If you can't do that, do not go down that road because once you fail, Chicago failed with the first time they tried to do that with IPRA. IPRA failed, and then they had to go back and say, what did we do wrong? How can we fix it? And then they created COPA. And so my advice is try to do it, but do it well. Reach out to the National Organization of Civilian Law Enforcement, NACO is what they're called. I'm still on one of their boards, and they'll walk you through the entire process. I don't lose a lot of sleep about civilian oversight boards because usually the investigations write themselves. Officers, unlike everyone else, they're compelled to give truthful statements. So you usually get to the bottom of it fairly easily. And we're the one profession where if you lie, you get fired.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And we have time for, looks like maybe two more questions before we go into the open Q&A. So if you have questions that we did not ask, Dr. Barnes, we please hold still because we will have that time in the Q&A. So let me share one more question with you now and see if you can answer this. So he's my J Lo Lee ask, I love how you acknowledge your crying moments as you have aged. May you share other areas of professional and personal growth that you've noticed as you've matured.
Um, I think I use less profanity. I don't know if uh, no, I think I've matured in time management. Um, you know, um, I've matured in knowing how to say no to people. I've matured in being able to answer the question, what do you need? And I think that's probably, other than, managing my emotions, that's probably the biggest thing. Because people will always ask you, hey, how you doing? Do you need anything? And without thinking, the first thing we say is no. And I would encourage everyone that when someone asks you that question, take some time to think about it and say, hey, you know what? Can I get back to you on that? Because I'm sure there's going to be something. And take a breath and say, you know what? I do need something. I did a presentation for the Oscar Renenbaum Foundation here in Madison recently, and they asked me, it's like, hey, what do you need, Chief? And I thought about it and I said, I want to invest in the leadership of our police department. I have police officers and leaders who've never been to a leadership training. I have police officers and captains and leaders who've never been out of the state of Wisconsin to learn something. And I'd like to be able to do that. And they gifted me $40,000, 20,000 this year and 20,000 next year, so that I can find opportunities for leadership for my folks. I'm sending two female leaders to a conference in New Orleans. It's a women in law enforcement conference. I'm sending one of my assistant chiefs to a 3-week training at Harvard University. And we can do this because, I thought about it and I answered the question, what can we do for you? And I've learned to do that. And so I just encourage people, when people say, how are you doing? Take some time to answer that in a couple of complete sentences. When they say, what do you need? I know you're working on this. How can I help? Take some time to think about it. So before you say nothing or I don't need anything, at least say, can I get back with you on that? Because there could be something that you need and you're expanding your village.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. And for those of you who had questions and want to have a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Barnes, please hold still. I want to thank Dr. Barnes for spending this amazing hour with us. As we conclude our session 2 of Black Voices Matter with Dr. Barnes discussing leadership in predominantly white spaces, I encourage each of you to carry forward the insights and strategies that we've discussed today. And remember, your presence in these spaces is not just a statement, but a testament to your resilience and excellence and the limitless potential within you. So let us continue to cultivate mindfulness, embrace our unique strengths, and forge ahead with unwavering determination, because we know that together we can redefine leadership paradigms and inspire a future where diversity, inclusion, and excellence are synonymous. I want to thank you for your commitment to leadership and change, because the journey does continue. On behalf of the AABERG and our colleagues, friends, and partners of the Division of Extension, we hope that we can call upon you, Dr. Barnes, to continue to engage us in meaningful dialogue. And I had lots of notes, lots of notes. And so there's a couple pearls that I want to walk away with, and I hope that you guys walk away with. Number one, walk like a ball player. I've never walked like that, but I'm gonna practice that tonight. Walk like a ball player. Have someone who believes in you. Identify that person. That's really important. And success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. So those are three pearls that I want to share with you. As a reminder, Dr. Barnes' full bio and recording of today's session can be found only on our SharePoint site. We hope that you have enjoyed yourself, and we'll return to our Black Voices Matter series part 3 next week. And the registration link will be dropped in the chat. Hopefully someone can drop it in the chat. Also, don't forget to complete the evaluation. Your feedback helps us to design this series and bring in the right people to present to you. So please, please, please complete the evaluation. Again, for those of you who will stay logged on to have more intimate Q&A with Dr. Barnes, hold on tight. Otherwise, have a wonderful afternoon, and we see you next week.